When you need a pretty hefty truck, well, you get a Ford. When you need a basic racing game with like no excitement, well, you can also get a Ford. Welcome to the Worst Racing Games, the internet series where you guys suggest different racing games that you think are terrible, then I play them, review them, and rank them. So last week we had the somewhat decent but still kind of rough Ferrari Trofeo Pirelli on the Nintendo DS, and now the Worst Racing Game wheel has blessed us with Ford Truck Mania for the original PlayStation. This game was released in September 2003, years after the PlayStation 2 was already in full swing. A fact that by now should shock nobody, yet somehow still manages to raise my eyebrows a little bit. It's one of those titles that seems to occupy a strange corner of gaming history. It's not quite a cult classic, it's not quite a forgotten disaster. To me, it just kind of seems there, this dusty relic of licensed racing that maybe even collectors barely remember. But today, with controller in hand and curiosity burning, kind of, we're diving in to Ford Truck Mania. So let's just begin with the basics. Ford Truck Mania is a racing game developed by Alpine Studios and published by Gotham Games for the original PlayStation. Despite releasing in late 2003, it is unmistakably a PS1 title, both in look and feel. The box art, the menus, the graphics, everything screams PlayStation hardware, not PS2. Obviously because that's the console it released on. In the world of licensed automotive games, it sits somewhere between mildly interesting and why does this exist? You're not picking from hundreds of cars, wrestling with deep tuning options, or even battling for pole position in beautifully rendered arenas. Instead, you're here for one thing: Ford trucks. Real ones, in racing form. The premise is very simple. You pilot tough Ford trucks across rough terrain, mud, mountains, desert roads, snow, whatever, and leave sedans in the dust, and yes, that is pretty much the entire game. Now before we dive any deeper into Ford Truck Mania, if you're new around here then please consider hitting that subscribe button and tap on that bell for notifications to stay up to date with the Worst Racing Games series. And if you want to support the channel any further, then please check out my Patreon using the link in the description below. Over on my Patreon, you can get access to cool goodies like early access to the Worst Racing Games series and your name in the credits of every single upload. And until the end of January, there's 30% off selected tiers, which you can see in the pinned comment down below. Anyway, let's get back to some Ford Truck Mania. So what modes does Ford Truck Mania actually have? At its core, the game is divided into three classes of competition: amateur, semi-pro, and professional. That's the career mode. Each of these classes unlocks tougher races and more challenging tracks. Heck, that's pretty standard for racing games, but for this title, that's where the structure pretty much ends. And to be honest, those difficulties are just a bunch of bullshit anyway, because it's just the AI getting more broken as the difficulties go on and harder for you to catch up to. That's basically all it is. Yes, the tracks are a bit more challenging, but what difference does it make when the AI can do it 100 times better than you can because they're just programmed to do so? Anyway, the other major component, and one of the only elements that really sets this game apart, is the track builder. Now, to some players, that term might evoke visions of complex editors like what you'd see in Track Mania, or even older PC classics like, I don't know, SimCity, but in Ford Truck Mania, let's just say it's a little bit more humble. The track builder is modular, grid-based, simple, and very basic, but it still gives you the freedom to create your own racing courses, choose your terrain modules, piece them together on a grid, and boom, you've got your own track to race on. It feels like a toy from another era. It was like someone handed me a box of Legos and went, okay, make something fast. And honestly, it was kind of fun. Now let's talk trucks. Ford Truck Mania lets you select 8 standard Ford trucks and 4 modified trucks. That's a total, for those of you not good at math, of 12 drivable vehicles, which is not that bad for a PS1 game. Before each race, you also get to tweak a handful of settings, such as steering, transmission, tyres, suspension, and even the colour of your truck. For a simple title like this, that's impressively comprehensive. Sure, yeah, there's no full vehicle simulation here, but for the era and platform, especially one that was comfortably on its way to extinction, shows that the developers at least try to give players something good. Now let's get honest here, Ford Truck Mania does look like a late-era PlayStation title. The graphics are rough around the edges with blocky trucks and simple textures, but they hold their own in a weirdly endearing way. The terrain, muddy plains, desert stretches and rolling hills, feels just detailed enough that you can tell what's going on, and I'll give credit where it's due, you always know where the track is, which matters more than you might expect. The separation between the track and background elements is clear, and the trucks themselves have enough visual personality that you don't forget what you're controlling, even when the frame rate starts wobbling about a little bit. The audio, meanwhile, is a bit of a mixed bag. On the positive side, the game leans hard into a guitar-driven hard rock soundtrack. It's loud, it screams "I'm manly and I drive trucks," and it gives every race just a little extra spirit. The kind that would make me pump my fist when I cross the finish line. On the less positive side, some of the sound effects like engine revs and tyres on dirt are functional but not really memorable or that engaging. They're fine, but they don't elevate the experience. But again, in a game like this, the visuals and audio aren't meant to wow you so much as keep you engaged. And for what it's worth, for the most part, it does do that. Especially the music. So here's where rubber meets the road. Ford Truck Mania has tracks, and it has your own tracks, but the raw variety is, well, fairly limited. Your career mode or main progression features a set number of predefined tracks, 10 if you count the unlockables. Fine for a PS1 game, many titles from that era barely scrape half of that. But here's the catch. These tracks, well, they don't really have that much going on. They're mostly turns, hills, and a few patches of mud. There are no major hazards, no obstacles, not really any intentional jumps, and barely any surprises. Just you, your truck, and a fairly generic trail ahead. Even the unlocked tracks, which you'd hope would ramp up in creativity, feel like more of the same. They're longer, yes, but they're not really any more interesting. That's where the track builder becomes almost the best part of the game. Sure, yeah, it's simple, square by square track pieces, but it's yours. You can make something more exciting than what the game's canned courses can offer. And after a few races, that freedom will start to feel like a breath of fresh air. How about the controls? Well, the controls in Ford Truck Mania are, well, they're functional. They're predictable, they're straightforward. They won't win awards, but they won't make you want to throw the controller either. Standard controls with X to accelerate, square to brake, and circle to power slide. Or, in theory, power slide. You can turn with the D-pad or the analog stick, and that's pretty much it. The trucks behave like trucks. They're heavy, they take a moment to wind up speed, and they skid through corners in a way that feels just tangible enough to make sense. Is it deep? No. Does it have any nuance? Not really. Does it feel like you're driving something with weight? Yes, at the very least. For a PlayStation title built around big trucks barreling across dirt and sand, that's pretty much exactly what you want. Here's the weird thing about Ford Truck Mania. Objectively, it shouldn't be good, it shouldn't be exciting, and by the strictest standards of racing games, excellent or otherwise, it's not, really. But there's a vibe here that kinda works. It's the soundtrack, the heaviness of the trucks. It's the simple joy of barreling down a track that you built yourself. It gave me this kind of goofy, borderline nostalgic thrill when I picked this rugged Ford, tweaked some settings, and just went, "F it, let's go." The experience is basic, but it's kinda honest. It's not trying to be Gran Turismo, it's certainly not trying to be something like Crash Team Racing. It's just trying to let you race trucks around dirt roads and have a good time doing it. And sometimes, every now and then, that can be enough. That might be all you need. Now, in terms of the critical response to Ford Truck Mania, I genuinely couldn't really find anything to tell you what critics thought of the game at the time. There's like no information about it whatsoever. I managed to find one review that was retroactively published in 2020, giving it a 6 out of 10, so thanks nerdbacon.com for giving me something to go off. As well as basically having no critical response, there were also no sales figures for the game, which would suggest it sold very poorly. Which wouldn't surprise me because this was a 2003 original PlayStation release. If you're curious, I did check how much the game is currently worth here in the UK on pricecharting.com, and apparently for a complete copy, you should be spending about £7 to maybe £8, so, not very much if you do want to get a physical copy of this game. Anyway, so now the time has come to rank Ford Truck Mania in our worst racing games tier list. Now, this week I have actually made some amendments to the racing game tier list, adding a new category called Hot Garbage, just below the rubbish tier. Now, the reason for this is because categories were starting to get a bit clogged up, and also there were some in the rubbish tier where I just didn't think belonged next to each other. For example, Cars 2 on the PSP is objectively worse than Test Drive 4 for the original PlayStation, so it's now moved down a tier and Test Drive 4 can remain where it was. Anyway, now that I've explained that a little bit, let's put Ford Truck Mania in the mix. So, Ford Truck Mania for me is a pretty standard, generic racing title. There's nothing really that wrong with it, but it's just incredibly dull. The track editor is very cool, but the rest of it is just very generic. So for me, this one is just gonna sit in the meh tier. If it had had just a little bit more sauce, this game would have actually not been that bad, and it would have joined the previous Ford title we looked at, Ford vs Chevy. But there's just not enough game here to really recommend it beyond being able to build very simple tracks. So there we have it. Is Ford Truck Mania a great game? No. Is it a fun game? At times, yeah, it can be. Is it worth buying? Well, if you're a collector, a retro fan, or someone who likes quirky off-the-beaten-path titles, then maybe, yeah, for curiosity's sake. This game doesn't shore up the legacy of the PS1, it doesn't define racing, and it certainly doesn't innovate, but it delivers something relatively unique. A simple, rugged, slightly goofy off-road truck racing experience that sticks in your mind longer than you might expect. If you approach it with the right mindset, not as a blockbuster title, but as a nostalgic curiosity, Ford Truck Mania can surprise you with small moments of joy. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our look at Ford Truck Mania for the PS1, and with it, this week's episode of Worst Racing Games. So what do you think of Ford Truck Mania? Have you played it? Are you going to go and play it now? Share your thoughts on the game in the comments section down below, and as always, if you have a suggestion you want to see on the wheel, pop that down there as well. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to press like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap the bell for notifications to stay up to date with my future uploads. And don't forget, in January there is 30% off selected tiers on my Patreon, so look at that pinned comment down below. A massive shout out to my Patreon subscribers for the continued support, and all I really have left to say is thanks and goodbye.